Okay, I gave all of you a piece of paper showing the URL for Part 107. This is the Remote Pilot Ground School. And we're going to cover in some correct order the items that show up on that database called 107. Pay attention to the fact that it's electronic CFR, right? Code of Federal Regulations. And it's pretty easy to find it, and then if you want to bookmark it after that, that's fine. If you don't, you just hang on to that piece of paper and you'll be able to go back to it quite often. And it's going to follow the same sequence that the test will follow, and it's going to cover the same material, and it's going to be nearly word for word. You'll find questions on the final exam that are practically taken right out of the writing in that Part 107. So, anybody have any questions on accessing Part 107? No? No questions? Okay. So let's take the general regulations, applicability, and in this particular case, the rules governing remote piloting do not apply to an air carrier. They don't apply to aircraft under Chapter 101 or aircraft that are exempted. And as you're writing this down, just think to yourself the question, if there's going to be a question on the final exam, how would they word it? And they would probably say something like this: what of the following are not involved in remote? And they'll probably say something like air carrier, aircraft under Chapter 101 exempted, and none of the above, right? And in that particular case, you would say none of the above. But your first thought ought to be, what is Part 101? What does that mean? Because if they say to you, under Part 101, here the following vehicles are exempted from this particular remote pilot restrictions and authorizations, what does that mean? Anybody have any suggestions of what Part 101 means? Well, what do you think it means? So if a remote pilot, if a drone is under this restriction, what wouldn't be? What about a balloon, right? A balloon? No? So those are the kind of things that fall under Part 101. And the reason I'm driving at it a little bit is because if you know the FAA, you'll realize that they might just go to the detail of saying, Part 101 contains such and such, does it fall under the restrictions of remote piloting? Even if you were able to fly a balloon remotely, would that fall under a remote drone? I don't think so. So anyway, that's the applicability, and this is going to go right down the order. If you've already accessed the URL 107 that I've given you, we're starting right at the beginning. The very next one is definitions, although we've covered that already, haven't we? We've covered that. The definitions, remember that? What is a drone? What is a drone system? Remember those definitions that we had the other day? The words were in green, the definitions, and then the definition was given after that, and there were about 6 or 7 of them. You should have those in your notes, I'm sure, somewhere. So I did not, pardon? Yeah. And that's on the, so if you need to find out what we did yesterday, it's recorded and it's on YouTube. So my lecture for yesterday's drone class is on YouTube. And the lecture for the history of aviation and today will also be on YouTube. Okay, so the definitions I'm not going to go over again because you all have those pretty much detailed. Just make reference to the fact that definitions are in your notes from October 17th, 16th. Okay, this is another one of those items that the FAA likes to test you on. Falsification, what does that mean? It simply means you better not do anything fake. You better not forge documents. You better not put the wrong name on documents. You better not pretend like you have a different number for your registration of your drone. You just don't do anything funny when it comes to dealing with the FAA and documentation and anything that has to do with correctness. That's essentially what this says. Falsification, repo, or alteration. You can't falsify. You can't reproduce something. Now, can you reproduce your drone license? Yeah, sure you can. I can make a copy of my drone license. And if somehow or other I lose it, I'll send that copy to Oklahoma City, and they can come up with one really quickly. Otherwise, if you don't have a copy of it and you lose it, or somebody steals your car and your wallet was in the car, you're going to be out of luck. So sure, would I make a reproduction of my license? Yes. Alteration means that if you have somebody's certificate and you put the wrong number on there or you change the date, those are violations. You don't want to do them. So here's the bottom line in my words. You can't fake anything. Just don't do it. And when the question comes up on the final exam, you'll probably get a bit of a chuckle out of it because it's kind of going to be an obvious question. Can you alter something such and such? And the answer is no, you can't. Period. If it says, can you reproduce your drone license? Can you make a copy of it? And the answer is yes, you can. But you can't falsify or do things that would in any way change the information that's on file for you and your drone. These kind of things are sort of common sense, and I'm sure that all of you by now have an abundance of common sense, right? Good. Inspection, testing, and compliance. These are things that you have to do. These are things that are required of you. Remember, I have to remind you one more time, I'm going to remind you again and again. You all are planning to get a very important document at the end of this semester, and that is a pilot and command license. And it's not only is it important because you can make money with it, it's also important because you are the guy or the girl who are going to be responsible for the proper operation of everything that goes on in a drone operation. You'll be responsible for the operator. Even if that person doesn't have a license, they're allowed to do it as long as you're there and you take control, right? You're also responsible for the visual observer. You're responsible for the condition of the control box. You're responsible for the condition of the drone. You're responsible for the weather conditions and whether or not you're near an airport. Those are all things that the PIC, the pilot in command, has to be responsible for. It's a big load of responsibility, and that's why you get paid for it. So if someone comes out one day from the FAA and said, I want to see your drone, I want to see your license, I want to see any certificates, inspection documents pertaining to that drone, you have to show that person if they are from the FAA. Do you have to give up your license? No. Don't ever hand your license over. You can let someone see it. Even an FAA representative, you can allow that FAA representative to look at your license. You can allow a police officer to look at your license, but you don't want to hand that license to that person forever. You hang on to that. The only person that can take it away is a judge in a hearing that you might request if you've done something wrong and you think you're not at fault. Then it would go to a hearing or administrative judge. And the only person that can ever say, turn your license in for 6 months or a year or forever, is the judge. Matthew. Someone did what?
If someone declined the inspection.
Someone declined an inspection? Well, would that be good, wouldn't it? Then you'd have to go through all the trouble. The only person that's really going to be interested in inspecting is an FAA representative. Somebody may have called and said, hey, those people over there are flying that drone and it's over my backyard. And the inspector will come over. He knows that you're flying it over the backyard. If there was nobody in the backyard and you were far enough away from the structure, you probably haven't violated anything. But he's going to be there. And in order to satisfy his time, he's going to want to see all the documents pertaining to your drone. Now, if you're saying, what if he doesn't want to? That would be 2 thumbs up, right? Because, you have to go through the hassle. Because maybe you forgot a document that you have sitting at home. You know you have it, but you forgot to bring it with you, right? Okay. Like your license. Okay, if for some reason or another you cause, and you're the pilot in command, but even if the operator of the control box causes somebody to get seriously injured, or there's damage in excess of $500, you have to have a report ready to go to the FAA offices within 10 days if they request it. They don't always request it, but if there is a request, you have to produce a report. And those forms are available online for injury or damage reporting. Pretty unusual. I can't think of too many times when I've heard of anybody having to issue a report for damage. Most people, if they damage their drone, they'll probably think, well, I can fix it up and maybe the parts will cost me $300 or $400, but it's nowhere near the $500 limit. Okay, so we've gone from deviation, send it to the report administrator if requested. So we're going to start with number 1 now, requirements. And unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to break these down, so we're going to take them one line at a time. And under the requirements, you have to have a remote license. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, law enforcement would mean either like a highway patrol or a local police officer, right? Okay. Generally, they don't necessarily want to get involved. What they would probably do is they would come by and maybe they would say, let me see your license, right? They would check to make sure that you are sort of legally operating. They probably don't even know the rules. And if there was any question, they would probably call Fresno at what is called the FSDO, Flight Standards District Office. FSDO. It's the only one in this area. The next one, I think, is out near the coast, around San Luis Obispo. And the other nearest one, I believe, is in Los Angeles. And there's one, I think, at San Jose. So the one that handles the entire area here is in Fresno. It's at the Fresno Airport. It's right near where we went to our field trip. And it's called the Flight Standards District Office, FSDO. I'm sure that the police would probably ask for some help in that case right on the spot, because even if you would, under normal circumstances, have to have a waiver to do something, like maybe at night or whatever, the police can override all of that instantaneously. Any emergency operation, we're going to show that on the slide, we're going to show that you can deviate from nearly every restriction. Either you can deviate immediately because of emergency situations, or you can deviate by asking for a waiver. Sometimes the waiver would take 3 months. Sometimes the waiver can be granted immediately, depending on how you apply for it. Adele? Did you have a question?
I worked on newspaper for a couple of years, and I have the old
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make a little money, you can always apply for all kinds of ways, places where you can apply to use your remote pilot license. Because remember, you can do commercial work. You can do compensation for hire. You can be paid in a number of different ways, and that's one of the questions that will be on the test. It has to do with compensation for hire or for hire, and does your remote pilot license allow you to do that? And the answer is yes. Okay, registration. Let's take registration. In the case of registration, every has to be registered. Hold on, okay, registration. And so all it says is, in the Part 107, it says registration, that the drone must be registered, period. If it's below a half a pound, it doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to be registered or anything. So our little hub sands that we're flying, they're way less than a half a pound, aren't they? Even with the batteries in it? Probably they're 8 ounces or less. I'm not sure. Half a pound, 8 ounces? Yeah, something like that. I don't know. They might be required. I'm not sure. I haven't weighed the ones that we're using out there in the field. Condition for safe operation, and this is maybe another question. These are all right from the 107 website. And that is, you cannot fly a drone if for some reason or another there's something wrong with the drone. And we found a couple of those things, didn't we? We found one of the propellers on opposite sides of the drone need to be the same shape. So on the drone is marked AA and BB. The A's are across from one another, not next to one another, and the B's are across from one another. And if you happen to lose a propeller and you put a new one on, make darn sure that it's the right propeller going on there. It's either an A or a B propeller. So in the case of condition for safe operation, it wouldn't be safe if you put the wrong propeller on there, because you guys already found out that, didn't you? Because one of the people were reporting to me that every time you lifted off, the drone would head in some direction you couldn't control, until we discovered that the propeller, one of the 4 propellers, was on incorrectly. It was an A propeller on a B stub, and it should have been an A propeller on an A stub or a B on a B. So, condition for safe operation, one of those questions could be, is there a requirement that all drones be in a condition of safe operation? And they might give you yes, no, or all of the above, or some combination of answers like that. So don't just assume that because it's a one-line deal here that it may or may not appear on the final exam. Remember, there are 60 questions, and they could actually ask you one question from every section, and that would cover all 60. Medical condition, we already know that. Right? We've talked about that before. We've talked about that in the Introduction to Aviation, and we talked about that in the last couple of days, where you have to be in good physical condition as pilot in command. In aviation, for example, if I'm teaching someone to fly and they're in that left seat, I am actually pilot in command, because they're not allowed to carry passengers. They can have a flight instructor with them, but I'm pilot in command, even though I might sit there for a couple of hours and never touch the controls, because maybe my student is far along in their training. But anything that happens in that particular instance means that I'm responsible for it. Let me tell you a sad story, a real quick sad story. A good friend of mine was checking someone out who already had a license, right? And he had a retractable gear airplane, and they were flying it at Chandler, over at Fresno Chandler. And on about the 3rd or 4th go-around, the man sitting on the left seat, who had a pilot's license, he had a license for his aircraft, he owned the aircraft, and he had a license, landed at wheels up, forgot to put the gear down. Guess who had to take the blame? My friend instructor. Why? Because the man's medical had run out. It had run out by 1 month. So instead of being legal as a legal pilot, he was at that moment a month in the illegal, and as a result, the instructor sitting there, my friend, wound up having to take the blame and the responsibility for the fact that it was his plane, he was used to flying it, he landed it wheels up, but because his medical certificate had expired, you have to get it every 2 years, his medical certificate expired, that put the blame on the instructor. So when all of you assume the role of pilot in command, you've got to be aware that if things go wrong, and they go wrong because of something that you could have foreseen or blocked or improved on, you're the ones going to take the blame for it. Just be careful. Okay, in-flight emergency. Anytime there's an emergency, you can deviate from it. You can deviate all over the place, as we talked about before. In this case, it's different from a waiver. Right? You can get waivers granted for specific things, but in an emergency has to do with a lot of different things, like Dale just mentioned, right? Helping the cops out with a local drone. That guy didn't even have to have a pilot license. The fact that he was flying a drone and the police said, hey, get that drone up in the air and tell us what you see, they can do that. They have the authority to override the restrictions that you'll find in remote pilot operations. Okay, hazardous operation, that ought to be fairly clear. If that question's on the test, just use your common sense. You don't want to do anything that's going to endanger people or property. That especially has to do with dropping things. So, for example, if you are out there as the PIC and you have somebody that's operating the drone and they've attached a camera to the underside of the drone, it's your responsibility to make sure that that attachment is strong enough so that the camera does not inadvertently fall from the drone. Right? That's your responsibility. Unless the person flying already has a pilot license like you do, and then you're there just as a friend or maybe an observer. Okay, operation from a moving vehicle. I'll bet you that question will be on the test. It seems to me when I looked at the test questions, I think that was one of them. And by the way, there are test questions online. There are 266 of them, and they cover everything that the test will cover. And if you know the answers to all 266, you'll probably get 100 on the final exam. It's a good idea to pay attention in this class, but if you have a memory that is that good, and you want to quickly move forward and get your pilot license, first of all, you'll have to demonstrate to me that you're that good and that you remembered that, and you'll show me the results of your test questions, and then I sign you off to go take the exam. Okay, so nothing moving except in a sparsely populated area. And by the way, you cannot transport anything for hire if you're going to be doing it in a moving vehicle. On the next one, alcohol or drug, is kind of interesting because look at that third line. You may be out there and you may be observing everything because you're PIC, and you may be getting paid as being PIC because you're the only one there with a license. Maybe they're paying you a couple $100 an hour, and you're wondering why they're paying you so much. And it's probably because they probably have some drugs hidden in the drone, and they're going to fly it over and they're going to land it somewhere, and somebody's going to pick it up and quickly take the drugs off the drone, and you're going to fly it back again. So be real careful. You're at fault if you even know that there are drugs on board. Umberto. Pardon? Yeah, go ahead. And daylight operation, we already talked about that, and we drew a nice little graph showing civil twilight. Anybody want to tell me what civil twilight is? Jordy? Remember civil twilight? Hold on, Andrew. Hold on, Umberto. 30 minutes before sunrise, and then when else? 30 minutes after sunset. Right. The two periods of civil twilight defined by everyone, 30 minutes before sunrise, 30 minutes after sunset. And that's because if it's a fairly clear day, when the sun sets, it's usually light enough to see a lot of things, including drones. But the FAA says, well, it's not quite clear enough, so you have to have flashing strobe lights on your drone if you're going to fly it in civil twilight. And those lights must be seen for 3 miles. Visual line of sight. That's important, and I drew a diagram the other day on the slant distance. So, I just asked Osvaldo a question. I said, hypothetically, if the drone was 3 miles away, first of all, you probably couldn't see it. But if it was 3 miles away and you were able to see it, and it went up 400 feet, would it be legal? 3 miles away, 400 feet up, would it be legal to fly that drone at that altitude? Eric, you say yes, right? Anybody say no? You say no? Okay. Does anybody know why the answer is no? What was the important distance for the visibility established by the FAA? Remember the word slant? Slant? The hypotenuse of a right triangle? So if it was horizontally 3 miles and up 400 feet, it's impossible for that to be within the 3-mile visibility limit. Because the slant distance might be 3 miles and 100 feet. It might be 3 miles and I don't know what it is. It'd be interesting to calculate. I'll calculate it for you next, and I'll tell you tomorrow how far off that is. No, if it went to 400 feet. 400 feet is the maximum altitude. That's legal. That's why I said, if it was 400 feet up, is it legal? And the answer is no, it's not legal. Yeah, and it's not legal, first of all, because of the visibility. If it was by itself, and if it was farther in, where it was just enough on the hypotenuse to be 3 miles, 400 feet is legal. No matter, and any side, anywhere inside that circle, it's legal as long as it's 400, it doesn't exceed 400 feet. Now, can it go higher than 400 feet? Can it go to 1,000 feet? Why not? Huh? No, if you have no waiver. If you have no waiver, can a drone go 1,000 feet? It can go legally. If you read it carefully, it said that maximum 400 feet, except if you are near a structure, if you are within 400 feet of a structure, you can actually go 400 feet above the highest point of that structure. So if you took a drone and went up along the Empire State Building and went 400 feet over the top of the Empire State Building, technically you would be legal. It's dumb. It would be... It is a trick question, but it specifies very clearly that 400 feet max, except where you're near a structure, and if you stay within that 400-foot radius of that structure, you can go up and over the top of the structure 400 feet. So that could be a trick question, sure. So look at what the pilot in command has to worry about when it talks about visual line of sight aircraft operation. Again, I don't want to scare you from making money. Just remember that when you walk out onto a site where there are drone operations, they're expecting you to take command of the operation. One of the reasons why I am famous for soloing my students in powered aircraft very early on with not a lot of experience is because I recognize that the minute they solo, they take command of the airplane. But up until the time they solo, they're always going to look to me, or they're going to hesitate, and I'm going to do this, and then they never ever take command of the airplane until they solo. But once they solo, their learning curve just skyrockets. Well, that's essentially what you have to do when you are a pilot, when you are a drone pilot, a licensed drone pilot. You have to arrive on the scene of where the drone operation is going to take place, and you take command of everything, of weather, of obstructions, of people. You need to know if everything is cleared and ready to go, and you can say the word, or you can say, no, there will be no operations right now because it's too windy, or because there's a rainstorm coming, or because there's a lightning storm in the area that could attract lightning. Remember, lightning can bolt more than 10 miles out of a thunderstorm cloud and hit people. In fact, there are videos on YouTube showing that, by the way, if you're ever interested. Okay, so visual line of sight, you're responsible. So pay real close attention to the things that you must do as the PIC in any drone operation. Visual, I'm sorry, what was that? Pardon? Oh, okay, sure. Now, I have made this exactly the same as the Part 107 that I want you to access online. So when you get online, you'll see this information exactly in the same order as I have it here, but with a little bit more explanation. So if you want a little bit more explanation or you want to fill in your notes, then tonight when you get home, access that Part 107 on the electronic sort of flight regulations, Part 14, CFR 114, aeronautics, as I recall it. Okay, visual observer. You're the one that has to maintain communication with everybody. You have to know what's going on. You have to know what's being planned. You have to be able to hear what the visual observer is telling the controller. You have to be able to talk directly to the controller. And if the controller doesn't have a license, you have to be close enough to take command of that control box immediately or have a buddy box. Everybody know what a buddy box is? Okay, it's a separate unit where you can actually take over electronically. Just like they did in the air traffic control tower, they showed you how a buddy controller can stand in the background and he can be listening step by step to a controller that's talking to an aircraft. And if that controller makes a mistake, the controller behind him immediately can cut in and take control and issue the right information. That's happened to me so many times in my 8,000 hours of flying, where I recognized that I was being given the wrong information, like turn left 270 degrees, and that would put me into a mountain. And I immediately hear somebody coming back with a different voice, overriding that previous instruction and giving me the correct instruction. So, in the case of visual observer, everybody involved has to be responsible, but you as the PIC are more responsible than anybody. And the last two units, operation of multiple SUASs, no, unless you get a waiver. And carriage of hazardous material, you may not. And if you want to know what hazardous material is, you'd have to look under 49 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations 171.8. And you can get any of those regulations on the FAA.gov website. Every single regulation, I think, that's ever been put out is on the website, accessible to you through links. So, if you happen to go to that website that I gave you at the beginning of the class, you will note that everything that's in my presentation is in exactly the same order from beginning to end, so that you don't have to go searching around for information on how to fill in your notes. And then, as I'm sure you already agree, in December, a couple of days before you take the test, you will get on, you will look at 107, you'll go quickly through it to refresh your memory, you'll take a couple of practice tests. I guarantee you that by the time you get to the middle of December, you will probably get more than 85% on any practice tests you take, because I'm going to be giving them to you that week. The week of December 11th, I believe it is, I'm going to start giving you practice tests so that you can get familiar with how it's going to be presented to you and the kind of questions that will be asked. And you'll be very pleasantly surprised that if you do the kind of study that you're doing now, you'll be very pleasantly surprised at how many good right answers you're confident of. You'll come out of that test confident that you've passed. You may not know exactly how well you did, but you will come out of that test knowing that you passed, and then unless they discover you're a terrorist, they're going to give you your license. Any questions now? We got 5 minutes before it's time to go, but if there are any questions about the process from here on, we're going to continue to do the same thing. I'm going to follow the rules. We're going to discuss airspace again. We're going to discuss responsibility of pilot in command. You are pilot in command. We're going to discuss anything that you have any doubts about, because we're not going to let you go from week to week with any doubts. I want you to understand, I want you to feel confident that you are clear on the issues and you are clear on the restrictions. So if you're sitting there wondering about something, don't sit and wonder, ask the question. Because now is the time for this week, next week, the week after that, all the way up until December, is the preparation for your pilot license, and I'm going to be happy to congratulate all of you when you get that license. I'm going to want you to come by someday and show me the license. I do that with all my students. When they get their private license, they get that beautiful piece of plastic with the Wright brothers on the backside of it. They come by and show it to me. It's worth it. It's something that you should be proud of yourselves to achieve. And it's something nobody can take away from you unless it's a judge. The only person who can do that is a judge. Remember that. You don't hand that license over to anybody, not to a police officer, not to a highway patrolman, not to some security guy, and not to an FAA administrator. That FAA person does not have the right to take that license from you. The only person that can remove that license from you is a judge. Questions? Any questions? I'm sure it's all clear, right? Nico, all clear, right? Where's Jacob, do you know? Okay. Raziel. Yeah, okay. Come on up and I will get that document for you. You have a bus to catch? Okay, let me get that piece of paper for you. Okay, you guys can slowly wander towards your buses. Let me get it for you. Okay, let me see your book. Is this it here? Sorry about that. I thought you just had a book and you just needed to sign and wait for it. Okay, right now, print your name, sign it, date it, and I'll give you the book. Yes. The book? It's a great book. I think it's wonderful. I love it. I mean, it's a great reference. Is it 18 today or 17? That's good. Thank you. Okay, we'll see you. Pardon? Yeah, I'm hoping that same feeling the kids will get, where they really want to do it. And if they want to do it, they're going to be really studying from now till December. I would have business cards printed. I would have announcements made that I'm at PIC of remote flying and I'm available at by appointment, and I would actually get into the business. Yeah, I would hope that the kids recognize that there's some real opportunity here for them.
That was my reasoning for asking the question. Now, have they seen the propellers on the drones? Have they looked at that?
Yeah, in fact, we had a couple instances where they replaced the wrong propeller on the wrong side. Yeah.